Hi, I'm Bernitha Rena. Welcome to the Bernitha Rena Relates Podcast. Today, I want to share a moment that completely caught me off guard. It was one of those times when you know, without a shadow of a doubt, that something is moving you. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't quiet. It was what I could only describe as a power push. It was a sudden, undeniable prompting that led me to do something totally unexpected. Something that I just didn't see coming, but I couldn't ignore it either. And honestly, it changed everything. Let's talk about it. So one afternoon, I'm laying in my bed alone, and I don't know where everyone else in my house was. I just know I was so peaceful. You know when you're in that totally relaxed state of near sleep, but you're not quite asleep? Well, that's when I heard a voice. It sounded a lot like my own voice. I heard the voice say, "Laurie needs some help. Laurie needs some help." I shot up in my bed. I wasn't afraid. I was just shocked, surprised, amazed. And remember, I'm in the room alone, but it didn't stop me from yelling, "Did you hear that?" Look, here's the thing I really want you to understand. I'm just a regular person. No halo, no prophetic visions, no backstage pass to the divine. I'm not some mystic or prophet or anything even remotely special. I'm just me. I'm just an everyday soul. And I'm trying to make sense of moments that don't always make sense. Do I get the occasional prompting or gut feeling? Sure I do. I always consider that intuition, and we all have intuition. In this moment, I knew something was different, and I knew that I really needed to pay attention. So I pick up my phone and I just start scrolling through my contacts, and I notice that I've got some Lauras and some Laurens and even a Laurie or two. But I know deep down in my gut that I wouldn't find that Laurie, the Laurie from the voice in my phone. I knew deep down that the Laurie that needed some help was the Laurie who had been my best friend all through college and into my early 20s. But that Laurie and I had a bit of a falling out. We just got to the point where we needed to separate in order to evolve and become the grown-up versions of ourselves. I just never thought it would turn into years and years of us not talking. I had not clapped eyes on this girl in over a decade. I tried to push the thought of the voice from my mind, but eventually I decided to just be obedient and find this Laurie. I mean, how hard could it be? Well, it turns out it was pretty daggum hard. I couldn't find this chick anywhere. It was like she was in the witness protection program. I tried the search engines, social media sites, the yellow pages, you name it, I tried it. Crickets. After many hours of digital detective work, I finally found her phone number. And I decided to send her a text instead of calling her since it was the wee hours of the morning. Here's the text I sent. "This is Bernitha Rena. I'm trying to reach Laurie. If this is not Laurie, my apologies. If this is Laurie, please know that I had a dream in which I heard a voice tell me you needed help of some fashion. Whether you need or want my help is beyond me. But if this is Laurie from college, can you please call me when you get a moment? Stay blessed. Have a great day." Okay, I know that text sounds really crazy, but it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and that was the best I could do. Later that afternoon, I got a response back from Laurie. Let me read it to you. "Hey, yes, this is Laurie's number. You can call me anytime. I'd love to hear from you." So I hop on my sofa and I hit the call button on my cell phone. Laurie answers immediately with a tight hello. And I say, "Hey, Laurie, you sound the same." And she says, "So do you." And then we both burst into spontaneous giggles. All of a sudden, we're like 19 again, and I feel pure joy. We're just wrapped up in sisterhood and fun and excitement. And we just start to exchange all these stories about our families and careers. But then she starts to tell me about what's been going on in her life for the past few years. And at one point, I literally gasped. But you know what? Laurie's here today, so she can tell you herself. Hey, Laurie.
Hey, Bernitha.
Welcome to the Bernitha Rena Relates Podcast.
Thank you.
How does it feel to be our very first guest that I've ever had on the podcast?
Oh my gosh, it's so exciting.
That's wonderful. I'm just so happy to have you here. So, Laurie, before we dive into everything, I was just sharing my experience and everything that I went through prior to reaching out to you. So I just want to rewind back a little bit and talk a little bit to me about that text and the phone call for a moment and just how you felt when you got the text out of the blue after all those years. What was really going through your mind at the moment?
Oh my gosh, I was surprised, shocked, but honestly not completely shocked.
Really?
I was going through a lot at the time, and I was just in a really weak spot. And I just know that I really, really needed a friend, but I just didn't have the energy to reach out to anybody. So I simply just prayed to God. I was like, please, God, just send somebody to me.
Wow. And you shared with me that the past few years had really been hard for you. And would you feel comfortable sharing with our listeners a little bit about what you had been walking through in that season of your life?
Sure. So to make a long story short, I had recently just lost both of my parents. But before I get into that, let me back up a little so I can give you some context. So I was adopted as a baby through a closed adoption. I was raised by my adoptive parents who were very loving. And while I always knew I was adopted, I dealt with a lot of identity and abandonment issues throughout the years. Mm-hmm. And that's something probably that a lot of adult adoptees can relate to. And I kept it to myself a lot. And it was really just because I didn't want to hurt the parents who raised me. I didn't want them to feel like they weren't enough, even though there was this really strong just desire and urge to know who I was and where I came from. So anyway, just to jump ahead a little bit, going quite a ways ahead, after I got married and my son was born, something major happened. I was unexpectedly reunited with my biological parents on both sides, both my mother and father, and both of their families. They weren't together anymore, but I was able to meet both of my families. And I knew this was going to be hard for my adoptive mom. I knew she'd probably struggle with it, and I was right. It was really, really complicated for her, for our relationship. And out of love and fear of hurting her, I tried to downplay it. I tried to keep most of my relationships and experiences with my biological parents to myself, kept it a secret, even though it was a huge emotional shift in my life and it was just super defining to my identity.
Sure. Wow.
So fast forwarding a little more, a few months after my daughter was born, I got a phone call from my adoptive mom's boyfriend. He told me she was addicted to pain pills and alcohol and that he could no longer handle the weight of her addictions. And honestly, I was stunned. I had no idea any of this was going on. Looking back now, of course, hindsight is 20/20, right? I can see it so clearly how, despite being a kind and loving mom, she had silently battled addiction for most of her life. There were so many situations that, as a child, I accepted at face value. They were wrapped in explanations or justifications that made sense to me then.
Give me an example. Like, what's something that happened as a child that now you think back on and you're like, wow, I could see where the alcoholism may have played a part?
If I was in a play at school or at a concert or an important sports event or even like a graduation, she would always be sick, like unable to get out of bed. And, I would just be told she wasn't feeling well. But it always came up on those really important events.
And your dad was telling you she's just not feeling well today?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. Or she would leave for a few days at a time, and we wouldn't know where she went. And she would just say, oh, I just needed to get away. But she wouldn't tell anybody where she was. She'd just pack her bags and leave.
Sure. I remember you telling me that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it was just things that felt unusual, but there was always a valid reason that always kind of made me say, okay, well,
yeah, that's plausible.
Yeah, this is normal. This is, in my child mind, I just felt it was normal.
And adults don't share everything that's going on in their marriage between each other.
Exactly. And, there were marital problems, which might have played into the fact that she would leave. But as a kid, you're thinking, what did I do? I must be responsible for this. So it was just one of those things that, together with the fact that I was adopted, I just felt like I was supposed to fulfill this role for her. My dad was different. He just kind of accepted.
Your adoptive dad?
Yes. He just
we'll call him that.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Just for reference.
Mm-hmm.
He just kind of accepted everything as it is, accepted me as I was. But I don't know if my mom had this deep desire for a child to fulfill her life, like that would fix all of her problems. And I don't think it didn't fix the problem. There was still like whatever trauma she had in her life that was undealt with was still trauma that was undealt with.
It kept showing up.
Exactly.
So all of a sudden it showed up in your living room because you get this call from her then boyfriend, and he says what? He says she's addicted to pain pills. She's had some issues with alcohol. You need to come pick her up. And you're living in another state, right?
Yes, correct. I was just stunned. Like, my daughter was an infant still. My son was very small. And it just was one of those situations where you're suddenly thrown into this traumatic series of events. And it was just so unexpected.
Wow. So she moves back to the state with you.
Yes. So we move her down with us and we move her into our house. And like I said, our life was already very full. We had 2 young children. I was working. My husband was working, just all the things that...
Life.
Yeah, life. Just normal life things. So she moved in with us, very frail at first. And, we just kind of loved her, helped her, fed her, just treated her with kindness and love. And she got better, I don't want to say like she was fully cured, but we saw progress. And she started going to AA, and we were hopeful, like, okay, maybe this is going in the right direction. However, after a few months, against our advice, she decided to get her own car and move into her own apartment. And that's where everything just kind of went downhill, unfortunately. With her not under our roof, she was able to kind of have more freedom to do the things that she wanted to do.
Like drinking.
Exactly. And it just spiraled out of control. And despite all my efforts to help her, support her, motivate her, it was just one of those cases where you really have to learn that, unfortunately, you can't help somebody who doesn't want to help themselves.
Doesn't want to be helped, right?
Exactly. And that was just a really harsh reality
for
me to see. And I kind of came to the point where I was doing all I could. I was juggling so much. My kids, my job, my home, just everything. And I was starting to run on fumes and burning out. And I started to realize that. And so I pulled back a little bit and kind of just gave it to God. And unfortunately, that's when she got diagnosed with liver failure. And after that, it was just a few months later where she passed away. And that was hard. It was hard because you feel like you failed, like I failed to help her, even though I realized that
she was sick.
Yeah, she was sick. It was not my fault. It was not my job to heal her. But at the time, you want to do everything you can, so it still felt like, despite my best efforts, I ran out of energy and I failed to help her.
Then on top of that, the world crashed, right? So you've got your own personal life and then the world crashed because the pandemic.
Yes.
Wow.
And pandemic came with its own source of stresses and anxieties just for people who are dealing with normal stresses.
Right.
Everyday stresses with kids in school and, just keeping family members safe and not getting sick yourself. So yeah, she passes away. And then just to add on to the trauma, my adoptive dad, who I loved and adored and had the most beautiful relationship with, he struggled with chronic illnesses and diseases pretty much my whole entire life. And those type of things were progressing as he was getting older. Unfortunately, he happened to get COVID and his body just wasn't strong enough to fight it. And unfortunately, 40 days after my mom passed away, he also passed away.
40 days.
40 days.
After
Exactly.
your mom passed.
Yes.
Your dad passed away. So you were just left in a state of what? What did you feel?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I just felt the overwhelming just grief and sadness and just kind of lost. Like, how do I even pick up the pieces and continue on? Not to mention that it's the dealing with the afterlife process of handling all their affairs, all their personal belongings. And that in itself, if anybody has ever gone through it, is stressful and time consuming.
Sure.
So I was looking at that situation like, I am totally depleted, exhausted, can barely function. How in the world am I supposed to now turn around and handle all their things?
Right. Was there anything in that moment or in that time or during your life that was helping you sort of get through?
Honestly, my kids, my husband, I knew that they needed me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, there was times where I just wanted to give up. I would go into the closet and I would just cry out to God and I would just be like, I can't do this. Why have you put all this on me?
Sure.
I just don't have the capability just as a human being to go on. There was times where I was like, it'd just be easier to just give up. But then I would look at my husband, who was my rock.
Mm-hmm.
I would look at my kids who showed me love. And honestly, they just loved me. They loved me through it. It was hard for them too, because that was their grandparents.
Right. They saw your
Yes.
mom in her addiction. Is
Yes,
that right?
They did. Towards the end,
Mm-hmm.
they did witness some of that, unfortunately. They were very young.
They were very young, but you almost have to wonder, was it unfortunate? Because do you sometimes wish that you had known earlier in your life, maybe in your childhood, what your mom was really battling? Do you think that would have helped you?
I think that it would have helped in certain ways. And then in other ways, it probably would have brought more stress.
Okay.
I think I would have felt more responsible to just me being the type of person that I am. I'm just if there's a problem, I'm going to do whatever I can to fix it. So I think in a negative way, it probably would have been all consuming for me. But in a positive way, I maybe would have learned how to deal with it sooner. And maybe when I didn't have all of just life's jobs of being a mom, being a wife,
Mm-hmm.
living in my full adult world.
So you can almost see it both ways. Like
Yeah.
to see some things when you're a little bit younger, it may help you in a certain sense because it could show you the real world and give you a little bit more a maturity or a little bit more of a worldview of, hard things happen.
Exactly.
But at the same time, in your situation, you do also see there was some grace in that because you were spared
Yes.
a lot of pain early on. Now, double down later on in life,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But you were spared so much in your younger years. So I guess you could see both sides to it. You're right.
Yeah. I look at a lot of that as, ignorance is bliss sometimes. So I was allowed to kind of go through that childhood and young adult and not be so burdened by it, even though there was some struggles with our relationship and there was always kind of a, what's going on here?
Mhm.
Something doesn't quite feel right. But now it makes total sense. I think it would have given me a lot more understanding for her,
Mm-hmm.
a lot more patience and
Sure. Compassion, maybe.
exactly
Mhm.
more compassion for sure.
Right. So if we could fast forward a little bit, mention to me in the past that you did feel like you were going through something sort of alone, right?
So while I did feel very alone, I do also want to mention, though, that God always sends you what you need in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, we were incredibly blessed by my husband's coworkers. They stepped in, helped clean out my mom's apartment, helped move out all the items. And it was just such a blessing, unexpected blessing.
Sure.
And then also my dad's family was there for me every step of the way, helping with anything and everything, cleaning his house, sorting through things, just being there for me in ways that I could have never imagined. And also my biological parents, even though they were still grieving their loss, which the loss of giving up a child for adoption is lingering for life, really. But they were still there. They were there. And then just time, prayer, rest, lots of patience, just patience with myself, patience with the healing process. But honestly, I think during all this time, I'm such a person that wants to just handle everything myself. I'm just kind of the way that I've been. I don't know if being adopted has anything to do with that. I feel vulnerable sometimes when I reach out for help. There's been times where help has been denied to me.
Do you think that's where that comes from? The vulnerability piece of it that you mentioned?
Possibly. It could definitely contribute to it. So for me to reach out to friends at the time, especially since we hadn't seen each other for a long time, it just felt so far-fetched. So like, why would you reach out to somebody like Bernitha or another friend when you haven't spoken so long? Why do you want to burden them with all your pain and burdens, which sounds so silly, but these are just the things that go through your mind sometimes when you're dealing with trauma,
Sure. But the interesting thing, when you were saying your prayer, right? The prayer that we've talked about, were you even thinking of any specific person? Were you just thinking, Lord, bring me someone?
Multiple different names came through my head, just
Same.
people who I've had deep relationships with.
Sure.
But I just gave it to God.
Sure.
I was like, whoever it is, whoever you have in this moment, just please send them.
And that's so interesting to me because, as I mentioned before, when I heard the name Laurie, even though I had so many Lauries in my phone, I knew all these Lauries, I'm like, no, I know exactly which Laurie that I'm being asked to reach out to. So when we finally spoke, right? So I text you this crazy text and you text me back and I get home and I call you and we started to chat. I've shared how I felt on my end. How did you feel?
Oh my gosh. So when I first saw that text, first of all, I was shocked, just shocked. And then I was like excited, relieved, like God answered my prayer, and I just felt happiness, like just a calming in my spirit. But at the same time, to be honest, there was also like a deep anxiety.
Sure.
And I think it was because I knew I had to open up about all the pain I'd been carrying. And I wasn't really like sure that I could truly be myself, like who you've known me as, And even though I knew you'd accept me for who I am, I mean, I know, even though it's been a lot of years,
like we know each other.
Yes, like I knew that you'd just be like, Laurie, I'm here. I'm here. I knew that. But it was almost like I felt like, it's weird to say, but it's almost like I felt a sense of shame.
No, there's nothing weird about that because I was a little, I don't know if the right word is afraid, but I was like, I don't know about sending this text. After everything I had done to find your phone number, I still paused for a minute. I still was like, oh, should I do this? And I said, I'm just going to be obedient. And if it's not her, well, who am I kidding? I know this is her. But if she rejects me, which I felt like this could be a possibility. Like, first of all, what are you talking about? Second of all, help. No, I don't need any help. What do you need help with? Right? Who knows? I didn't know what you were going to say.
Right.
But at the same time, I felt, I'm going to do it and let's just see what happens. So despite the fact that we go back, can we just take the folks back for a minute? Let's just go back for a minute. So Laurie and I know each other so well. We lived in the same dormitory. We also worked together in college. We'd see each other around, the campus. But once we actually met and chatted, we just instantly clicked as friends. We had a similar sense of humor and similar taste in music at the time. We were just like those close, hang out every day type of friends. Yeah. And then at one point, remember, we were even planning on getting an apartment together. So tell them what happened.
We were going to get an apartment together and we had it all planned out and we were furniture shopping and we said, okay, let's put our names on 2 different waiting lists. I'll put mine on one, you put yours on the other. And then that way we'll maximize our chances of getting an apartment. Right. Because these campus apartments were hard to come by. They were in high demand.
High demand.
Yes. So we did.
But we're also very different in a lot of ways.
So we were both headstrong in our own ways, which made us get along great most of the time. But sometimes our personalities would clash.
When they clashed, it was like epic. It was great.
Well, we're both highly responsive people.
Very much so.
So
passionate people. Yes. So as much as we got along in our youth, if things didn't go well or we disagreed on something, it was like World War III is happening.
So then one day I got a call from you. Mm-hmm. And you basically just came out and said, you didn't think us rooming together would be a good idea.
Yeah, I did say that. And I know that hurt. And it hurt me to say it, truly.
Right.
And it was honestly one of the hardest things I'd done in my little life at that point, to call a friend and say, I don't think we should be roommates. And I don't know if I told you all this, but I would lie awake at night and I would just be tossing and turning because something just didn't sit right. I just have this gut feeling that if we live together, somebody's going through the window. It's not going to be good. And it's not that I didn't care about you. It's just because I cared so much. Right. And so after I called you and told you that, and you weren't happy with me, but sure enough, after that, my name got called up on the waiting list. Yeah. And I ended up choosing someone else to be my roommate. And that person had a totally opposite personality from mine. Yeah. Very calm, very always the same sort of a temperament every single day, which was great because I was always all over the place. So, I ended up moving into the apartment with this, we'll call it calm roommate.
Calm roommate.
And you ended up staying in the dorms.
Yes. So I ended up not getting called up on the other waiting list. So my other choice was to stay in the dorms, which honestly, I'm going to be real. At the moment, I was like, I got to stay in the dorms.
Right. I understand.
You get to have this apartment. Right. I'm in the dorms.
Right.
Oh, yeah. That's my young mind speaking.
It makes sense. I'd be ticked too. I'd be mad too.
So here I am staying in the dorms, but I get this amazing roommate who has a totally different personality too. Totally calm. Ends up being a best friend to me. And it works out.
It works out really well. So eventually we all mend fences.
We do.
And the beautiful thing is I actually also become great friends with your roommate. And we're all hanging out. My roommate, your roommate. And we just would all hang out together. Eventually my roommate entered a graduate school program and went on their way. And the rest of us finished undergrad and just continued life together. Really.
Yeah.
And the 3 of us were totally inseparable. Laurie, myself, and Laurie's roommate from the dormitory. We were
the 3 amigas.
Yeah. We were. And then life just moved us all on. Time just moved on. We matured. We dove into careers. We expanded our circle. And eventually we started our own families. And somewhere along the way, we drifted apart. We tried.
Yeah, there was times where we would reach out to each other, but it would just be the timing wasn't right. Mm-hmm. Either somebody had a newborn or it just didn't work out for some reason.
Right. We'd see each other on occasion.
Yeah, we'd say hi. Or dinner. Always friendly.
Always.
Yeah, but it just
never was the same.
Yeah, we just never connected on that level.
On that level anymore. Yeah. And the irony of it all is that your roommate from college was actually a bridesmaid in my wedding and also in your wedding.
Yes.
And she and I stayed friends for years, still great friends
Right.
for over 20 years. One of my best friends. And
Yeah, same.
one of your good
my
friends.
best friend.
And it's just very interesting how life happened and
Yeah.
how things were even happening behind the scenes that we couldn't really see until now.
Yes.
All these years later, we can just kind of see how, life was happening for us.
Yes.
And we weren't catching it, right?
We
Until
just
now.
weren't catching it until out of nowhere, I get a text message from you.
Yeah, you get this text from me less than a year ago, really.
Yeah. Yeah. It hasn't been that long.
No, it hasn't, since we sort of been back in each other's life, even though it feels like it was just yesterday. And we realize now just how perfectly timed it all was and how there's so many things that you just can't plan. And we're
Right.
both big planners.
Yep.
But you just can't plan every single thing in your life. And sometimes things just happen to you. And then sometimes things just happen for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
It is interesting. And it's also so interesting. We've told each other, you're still the same person. You're just like a more refined, more mature version of you.
That's so funny. I don't know why I really like that word refined.
Yeah. Like you're the same. I'm the same. We're just a little bit more mature, a little bit more refined.
When we finally connected and I said, come over, let's have dinner. And you walk through the door and it was just like old times.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Meanwhile, our husbands are like, first of all, who is this?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because although there's pictures of us together and all this stuff, they had never met each other.
No, never. We're just continuing on from like it's
in our minds,
Yeah.
it's just like no big deal. Yeah, it's Laurie. Like she's coming over here. Like and my husband's like, she's got kids? Who are these kids? I was like,
and they're not little anymore.
yeah, right. So it was just so interesting. And one day we'll have to have them here, right? We'll have to have our
Yes.
husbands
yeah.
here. But they're just like, okay, you're just inviting this lady back into our life, like
this
she's your
is it.
sister.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but she is.
Yeah.
She is my sister.
Yep.
So Laurie, if there's anything at all that you would say to someone who is in the middle of their own storm right now and they're listening, what would you say to them?
So honestly, I would say this. You don't have to be okay to keep going. And you don't have to keep going at full speed to be strong. Sometimes survival looks like just getting the dishes done.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes it looks like just letting them sit and rest instead. What matters is that you just hold on. You don't have to hold on perfectly. It doesn't have to look perfect. Just be honest. Be honest with your journey. Grief doesn't come with a checklist, right?
Right.
Healing doesn't follow a written schedule, although we would like it to, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'd like to know what's coming. But some days it just feels like your heart just hurts from all that it's carrying. And you just have to know that eventually things start to get better, little by little, right? Baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
I know for me, I was just thinking, I'm never going to feel better. It's taking forever. But you just have to take little tiny bits of progress and embrace it. Some days it's just, hey, I got up and I cleaned the kitchen and that's what I accomplished today.
That's enough.
I'm healing.
Right.
I'm healing. You have to give yourself grace. You're never behind on healing. You can't get behind. I felt like I was so behind at times. But now knowing I was never behind, I was right where I needed to be.
Right on time.
You're always exactly where you need to be. And that's enough, Let other people help you when they can. Sometimes there's not anything anybody can do. And you just have to be, And in those moments, you just have to let the quiet things remind you you're here in this moment and you're you and you're who you need to be at this moment. So just be you. Yeah.
Laurie, thank you so much for being you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being my very first guest on the Bernitha Rena Relates podcast.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.
Laurie and I have been hanging out ever since, and it's led to many other things, including us working on this podcast together. Yep, turns out Laurie's a production genius, and she's incredibly creative. But most importantly, she's my friend, and I just feel so blessed to be working on this with her. Being around her was one of the many catalysts that helped me to see that I needed to slow down in my life. And I somehow sped her up in hers. There's an unstoppable force within us all, a force that can drive us to take bold steps, overcome obstacles, and even transform our lives if we let it. Some call it the power of the divine, inner tuition, or the Holy Spirit. Whatever you call it, it can push you forward when you need it the most. I know that's exactly what happened with Laurie and I, and it's one of the reasons that we're sitting here today. Again, Laurie, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to every listener who took time out of your busy day to listen in. I love you and I appreciate you for it. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and X at Bernitha Rena Relates. And of course, like, subscribe, and share this podcast anywhere you listen to your podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll talk soon.
What's been done is done again. Same old story, different man. Yeah. We make mistakes, trying to learn from what life takes. We love.